Well, let's get started. Today, we're going to have a great conversation with Dr. Samuel Helms. He's from Fort Collins, Colorado, and he is the owner of Beacon Learning AI. And we are just going to have a conversation about all about AI. It's a really hot topic right now. We've got ethics questions, authenticity. We've got
Mm.
just tech stuff that we're going to talk about. And we're just going to have a conversation about how this weaves into your life, how it weaves into your marketing. And yeah, thank you so much for having this conversation, Samuel. Like, we've already had some great conversations so far. We met in a networking group like a month ago.
Yeah, it's about
And
a month ago.
yeah, we had a lot of great conversation points, and we are like,
Mhm.
we need to share this with more people because a lot of this are things that we're discussing already.
Mhm.
um, but yeah, so go ahead and start by tell us a little bit about what you do, Samuel,
Oh,
and
excellent. Okay.
about Beacon Learning. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kelly. This is a lot of fun. Thanks for inviting me to the live here. I like this, and I think this will be a really cool discussion too. My background is educational technology and instructional design. So, for the last 25 years, in a college professor, and for the last 25 years, I've been doing a mix of those three things, which basically means, from a higher ed standpoint, working with colleges and universities, advising them on technology adaptations to enhance learning. So a lot of that's with online learning, with learning management systems and that kind of stuff. But earlier it was also like smart boards, interactive whiteboards, it's more generic term, but also like clickers, which were replaced by mobile phones very quickly. But so there's a lot of different technologies, and schools are bringing me on to sort of vet the technology and see whether it's going to make a positive or a negative impact on student learning in a host of other factors. Usually retention's part of it. There's also, ROI factors. There's also the side from the teacher to say, well, is this like a positive influence on their class or not? So, and then being a teacher as well, being a professor, I would use the technology, and that's kind of the role I took on. I was like, okay, well, I'll be that early innovator and jump out there into the new technology and just see if it's going to work. And that's how I approached AI. When AI was released, and well, when I started using it in 2023, I very quickly began to see, I'm like, oh, the whole game is changing here. This new technology makes the job I was doing, like building online courses as an instructional designer, very different, very different. The way it was done and the way it could be done now are completely different processes. So different that it makes no sense to go to the old way. So the question was, as I see the technology roll in, a question that always kind of stands out to me is, okay, with each new technology, there's a lot of hype around it. Every single one has all this hype. This will change everything. I don't know, whatever. Things change, things adapt, but my role I've kind of found is combing through that hype and trying to look at, okay, well, where does it actually work? And one of the things about AI that I've started to notice through kind of the people talking about it, and there's a lot of great things about AI. Don't get me wrong. I'm really excited about it and the possibilities, which we'll get into. But one of the sides of it is, okay, well, how do we use this responsibly? How do we use this ethically? How do we use this in a way that adds to rather than takes away from? Um, and I'm excited to go down that rabbit hole because I think the fact that we're having this live and this discussion is great because this is exactly how I think we as a species, if you will figure out this question is by talking about it, trying it, making mistakes, being like, well, that didn't work out. It didn't like the way that acted in that particular situation. Maybe this doesn't apply to these other situations, whatever. So at the same time, it is very empowering, I think, for small businesses like we were talking about. So there's positive and negative. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's an
And that's
exciting
something
rabbit
we
hole.
have in common is we both share a passion for helping small businesses, which
Mm-hmm.
is part of, like obviously that's our role in each of our businesses, but also just how can we help the small businesses expand their reach, and
Yeah.
also using AI. I know too that we've had some conversations on LinkedIn, like you've posted recently about talking about getting left behind if you're not
Mm-hmm.
learning. I would love to dig into that. I know that's not in our notes, but I would love to dig in
Oh,
a
no,
little
go
bit
for it.
into
Yeah.
that about like the importance of staying in front of technology.
Yeah.
Like what would you advise a small business owner who's like maybe like just use ChatGPT sometimes, but maybe not
Yeah.
not to the full extent of what they could. What would you advise them?
That is a great question. That is a great question. The way I summarize it is this: it is easier to keep up than it is to catch up.
Mm.
And I've been saying that about any piece of technology. Because like again, higher ed colleges tend to be a little slow to adapt. They're very, very cautious about it, which I get. Like there's a lot of like between the FERPA and the laws and all this kind of stuff involved. It is sort of a slow process. However, that being said, from like business owners and things like that, like get in there and start using it. Even if it's just the free version of ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it is, get in there and just start using it, start giving it prompts and seeing how it responds. But that's what I mean by like it's going to be easier to keep up than it is to catch up, which is as fast as this technology changes, and it is mind-blowingly quick how
Yeah.
different these models
Yes.
are. Yeah. Like using GPT 01 or 03 is so much different than 4.0 or even 3.5. It's like this is just wildly different. So as this grows, and this is where I mean, I think that keeping up with it is going to be really important because of how fast it's moving. Just use the latest model, just default to the latest one. I don't think it makes sense to use the older ones unless you're like running out of tokens or something like that, or the cost. But beyond that, just kind of play around with it, ask it questions, experiment with it. You're not going to break it. And again, I say we learn by doing, especially with something new like this. We can watch videos, we can learn, watch tutorials and stuff like that. But because of the dynamic nature of AI, generative AI in particular, in this case, I think it would be honestly more productive if people just jump in and start using it. You're not going to break the technology, and you don't
Right.
have to use what it produces. Like there was a few times I was trying to get like some sort of social media kind of content out of AI, and eventually I would just give up. I'm like, you know what, this is not working. I'm just going to write it myself.
Yes.
Because for whatever reason, it just wasn't on the same wavelength that day. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's starting to be there's some what a friend of a client of
Mm-hmm.
ours actually posted about this. We recently just blogged about this and released our blog about when are there times that we shouldn't use AI. And
Exactly.
we've talked about this. That sometimes there's that voice, there's that empathy, there's that
Mm-hmm.
compassion, there's that excitement or something that any kind of emotion that you have in the human nature
Mm-hmm.
is really, really hard to translate. Like it's a computer with, that's programmed.
Right. Yes.
They're not humans, just as we can't speak dolphin or
Right.
cat. Sometimes I'll go up to my cat and go meow, 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 like, I
Yeah.
probably have 27 grammatical errors to her.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so
You're like, this
it's
person just doesn't get the meow language. Not at
right.
all.
Or I
Yeah.
can't believe she just said that to
Yeah.
me. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So, there's a human element to it that just can't translate. As much as the
Right.
tools progress and transform and evolve, that human element just is not going to be there because it's not human.
Hmm.
But it can still be a tool, like you said, like maybe it gets you started. One
Yeah.
of my favorite
Yeah.
ways to use it is give me four ideas, you know,
Hmm.
and then from there, like sometimes it can just get the creative juicing rolling.
Yeah.
So like an example is we put together for one of our clients, we put together like a editorial calendar. Actually, we do this for several of our clients, but one I
Hmm.
was working on one yesterday that kind of brought this to mind, and I was using ChatGPT not as like an end all be all, but like
Hmm.
almost having a discussion with it.
Like
Like
like a thought
these are
partner or something, right?
yeah, like
Yeah.
yes, that's a great way of putting a thought partner where it was just like we were going back and forth. I was like, you know what, and you can be kind of blunt, like, hey, these
Yeah.
examples are nothing like what I want. Like, this is way
Hmm.
off base. And anytime you can, you know, I notice when I say that, or like, like these, I need more. I need more
Hmm.
in this way. They produce more. So I like your idea
Yeah.
about like just getting on there and trying it. It doesn't, it
Hmm.
doesn't hurt. It's a free tool.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
It'll give an idea of like kind of how it responds and the pitfalls with it, like you're saying. It's like, okay, this is just not clicking for whatever reason, and those are important moments, I think, for us as humans, because it's like, aha, I got one over the AI. It can't do
mhm.
that, but I know I can.
Yes,
Maybe with some more practice or something. But
yes.
one of the things I'm curious about, you mentioned like media and social media. So full disclosure, I like super quiet on social media. I don't know. I just don't post much. And I know I'm trying to be better about it because from a business standpoint, they always say social proof and all this kind of stuff. So I was trying to at one point use AI to kind of help me write it. And after a while, I just stopped because I was like, this sounds so generic. It does not sound like anything I would put up there. So I'm curious from
Mhm.
your standpoint as working in media, where do you see the AI and social media? Do you see that kind of same kind of thing? Is it just like steamrolling creativity in social media, or is there a way to leverage this in a different way?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. And it's interesting as I've worked more and more with AI, it's easy for me to spot an AI social media post.
Mhm.
I think we talked about this in one of our first discussions. We were talking
Yeah.
about like how it just has those telltale signs. One of them, and our client was actually, she actually posted on her Facebook feed about this, was the double dashes.
Oh yeah.
Those are like a telltale sign, those double dashes. But that's one of them. Another one too, is the word ensure. I see that
Mm-hmm.
word a lot. It is a word that people use, but it was just like everything was like to ensure that blank, blank,
Yeah.
blank, or you know, to ensure, this side of things. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's words that it spits out that might not be true to your brand. Like for Gold Bear Media, I don't know if I would use the word ensure. It's kind of a more formal, older word.
Mm-hmm.
So like, even if I get ideas from there, I definitely try to use whatever the brand voice is for our clients,
Right.
along with like, um, adding in my own creativity, my own human touch, like we talked about. One of the things I really, really love using, because, like we live in a fast paced world and
Mm-hmm.
social media content, like a lot of times we're creating content 5 days a week for clients. And, we get moving quick. Not all of us are experts, top of the line grammar people. We
Right.
all
Yeah.
are college educated. I have one girl on my team who has like a master's in creative writing, and poetry. And so
Oh,
it's
excellent.
like, these are things that are good to have on your team. But even then, it's really nice to do a grammar check and have it run
Yeah.
through AI.
Yeah.
I've really found that to be incredibly helpful. Also, clarity. Sometimes I've
Mm-hmm.
had some hard emails to write, and I want to make sure
Yeah.
that my words are coming across correctly, but also gracefully, not like
Mm-hmm.
in a mean way. I never obviously want to be mean on an email or have it come off or rub someone
Right.
the wrong way. So
Right.
sometimes I can kind of run what I've written through
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT, kind of soften it up a little bit, or check for clarity. Those are all really, really great things that have been super helpful in the marketing side of our business. And really,
Oh,
if you're a
excellent.
small business leader, like honestly, run your stuff through a grammar checker. It's
Right.
always a good
Yeah.
idea. Yeah, yeah.
That's
Um,
well, it's a really good point too. If I could just dovetail on that, like the word that jumped out at me that I literally never saw was bespoke. And all of a sudden, when AI came out, I'm like, but the word bespoke is everywhere. I've been an English major for, I've been teaching English for a long time. I rarely see that word because it's one of those older words that all of a sudden has just kind of reappeared. Thanks large part, I think, to
yeah,
ChatGPT, because that's where I see it. I agree. Yeah, there's these telltale signs. The other one that it does that I find that I put in every single system instructions to stop doing this is to stop bolding phrases in the middle of a sentence. I'm like, that is just not. First of all, it doesn't come through on social media because they don't have that. So you just get the asterisks and the markdown. So it's just kind of annoying. But even in an email or something, I'm like, no one does this. Like, you know what I
yeah,
mean? Maybe a
yeah,
word to
yeah.
emphasize it, but even then, it's fairly non-standard. Most people, I think, use italics. But one area I totally agree, and I really really liked it is those emails that you were talking about, the ones where I'm
Mhm.
like, dude, how do I say this? I don't
Yes.
exactly know how to put this. And I'll go into my email, especially if it's a thread, and go to print. It's because I give you the whole thread and send that copy and paste that entire thread
Ooh,
into the AI
that's a good
because
idea.
and I'll tell it who I am and who I'm talking to. So it knows who we are in there.
Hmm.
And the advantage of that then is now it knows one, the whole conversation. So it knows the context usually. And also it knows how I write. And so I'll add in there, okay, I am Samuel. Take a look at how I write. And I want you to write this empathetic message of no or whatever, whatever the message is,
Right.
but still keeping to my style, please. And they've gotten a lot better about that. They've gotten a lot better. The thinking models in particular are a lot better. It actually like thinks through their writing style. And to your point about the grammar, it's the same style, but more grammatically correct.
Hmm.
And also like I can take the style and adjust it. So I could say, okay, well, let's make this at a 10th grade reading level or a fifth grade reading level or
Ooh,
12th or college. You can shift it around and
yeah.
it'll kind of adopt it a little bit to each of those. And it's like, okay, that tends to help better. Um, it's actually kind of interesting because one of the things I was up to with that was I was similar kind of process. I was emailing someone and I gave them the whole email thread, a lot of different email threads. And I asked it, look through this person's emails to me and analyze their style and the questions that they're asking and what their expectations are. Then here's the draft email I wrote. I want you to evaluate it as if you were that person and
Ooh,
rewrite it based on that. And so I was curious because I'm like, okay, the test to see how accurate this is when I send it back to the guy and get his response. So I did. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to change what the AI said. I'm going to trust it here. And I'm going to send it. I changed like a few things, but mostly I left
right.
it because I wasn't sure. And his response was super positive. He's like, wow, this is fabulous. And I didn't tell him what I was up to, but I was like, no, this is interesting. So use it to kind of give critique, kind of like you were talking about with the grammar, to
Mhm.
give some critique from different perspectives can really add to it in ways that's new. That's new with that technology. I don't
Yeah.
can't think of a way to do that without AI, except for asking a person. So
Yeah.
that's super
I
handy.
love that little hack there with loading the whole email thread in.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's fantastic. I had a client that we sometimes write emails for, so it's getting their tone and all that. We first AI, they were like, just do it really quick in AI. Okay, do it.
Yeah.
And then it was, I hope this email finds you well. Like it's like
Yes,
the
that's right.
standard opening
Yes.
for all like ChatGPT emails. And
Yeah.
so he beat that out of me. He was like, an email can't find anyone.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. They find the email if nothing else. Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that has been like totally beaten out of me. But I love that idea. I think that's super helpful. Like, there's a lot of, again, we're in a quick world,
Right.
quick, fast-paced world.
Mm-hmm.
There can be things that can be missed from emails, and somebody
Mm-hmm.
might like, like especially like a client or if you have a customer or something like that. You want to be able to make sure you're picking up all the things, and sometimes, at
Right.
least for me, like those, sometimes the little things get missed.
Exactly.
So by
Yeah.
being able to evaluate further, maybe even like, hey, ChatGPT, can you pull out some bullet talking points? And like that can be helpful to you.
Mhm.
So I love that trick. Thank you. I'm gonna take that
Yeah.
one.
Oh, that's a good. Yeah.
It's
And
a good
that's
one.
and that's exactly how I approach it with Beacon Learning. Is like I think there's a lot that can be. So there's a lot of like AI tools out there that do specific things, and they all have their own strengths and like they're amazing, I'm sure, in the industries that they work in. But so it's like talking about the small business entrepreneurial kind of role, it's like, well, there's a lot we can do with just the
Mhm.
plain ChatGPT, Claude, just the plain interfaces of
Yeah.
them between the project and examples like that. And it's just like finding ways of using that base model for all kinds of different stuff. But
Mhm.
in the process of that, I'm glad that you brought this up too, because in the process of that, it's like, well, generally speaking, don't just take the completion, meaning what the AI produces, and just send it out without looking at it first. I was doing a I guess it's podcast speech kind of thing, a 10-minute speech on online, and I took all the criteria for the speech, gave it to ChatGPT, gave it my ideas because I already knew what I wanted to talk about and how I wanted to talk about it. So I gave that to it and then said, okay, write me a speech that meets this criteria. And it did. It kicked it out really quick. I was really surprised that it about nailed the 10 minutes. I was kind of shocked by that. Usually they're not very good with time.
Yeah.
Um, and however, even though it did a great start, it was like what you were saying, it was a great start. It got me like maybe 80 to 90% there. And I went back through it and I'm like, it keeps trying to go this way. And I don't know why. And so I would take that out and change it.
Yeah.
Um, and you know what I mean? But still, it got me well past the initial starting point.
Right.
And then editing that content afterwards, now it became a mix. And this is sort of the next sort of piece I wanted to ask you about was the authenticity part of this.
Hmm.
It sounds super generic, like we're talking about. And so that like for me, as we kind of asking this question is, so is online, is this going to be all becoming, they call it like the death of the internet? It's just completely
Hmm.
flooded with AI content to the point where it's like unreadable. It's like meaningless. And so if that happens, I wonder then authenticity would shine in a space
Hmm.
dominated by mediocrity. And
It definitely, it
yeah.
definitely is. There's a lot of conversation around it right now with like through blog articles, YouTube
Mm-hmm.
videos I've been watching that because there's been so much, and it's cute. I think there's a, I don't know, like this morning I watched a video about a kitten who was making a hamburger at McDonald's and it was all dressed and it was making the fries
Oh,
and stuff. It was
little video.
super cute and like
Yeah.
it's a novelty, you know. It's like,
Uh-huh.
did that really make my day better? I don't know, but it was cute.
But it was cool.
So
Yeah. It was like, I like
I
it.
think in the height of novelty of the AI, I think it's going to kind of wear off a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think people are craving real. There's a
Yes.
huge
Yeah.
shift of kind of between that um, polished, like we saw in graphic design.
Mm-hmm.
So I got started with graphic design in the very early 2000s, and everything was very polished. Everything
Right.
was very, you know, down to the pixel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's shifting with kind of this Gen Z coming up where it's like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to take a picture in my, you know, with my hair all a mess and stuff. And this is really who I am. I don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
with makeup. I just want to show off who I am. I don't have to have the perfect body. You know, my house doesn't have to look perfect. And sort of this genuine, like, this is who I am. And either you're kind of going to like it or you're not.
Mm-hmm.
But it does, I think it is all that to say, I do think that the authentic stuff is going to, and it already has shown to shine through.
Mm-hmm.
The novelty of watching the cat make fries at McDonald's, you know, that's a one and done. I was kind of giggling
Yeah.
at it a little, but you know, people want to see, um, they want to see the flaws because that's part of what
Right.
makes us human, you
Yeah.
know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's an important part. It's definitely an important part of it.
Mm-hmm. And
Um,
that novelty aspect is kind of like the hype I was talking about earlier. It's like, you know, there's whenever the new technology comes out, there's all this like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And
yeah.
the problem with trying to build anything on the novelty is the novelty will eventually very wear off, and probably
Mhm.
a lot quicker than people think, especially with younger generations. They adapt so quickly. It's like, well, oh yeah, okay, yeah, we already got this, like whatever. You know,
Yeah.
and but the thing about the authenticity, one of the things that I find really exciting about this, so you're talking about your friend who was like a poet, right? Like,
Mhm.
so it's like, so from that angle, it's like, well, is AI going to make that kind of an industry obsolete? And I'm like, actually, I don't think
Mm.
so at all. It can mimic poetry, but being an English major, I was like, true poetry, I don't see an AI coming up with that anytime soon.
Yeah.
That's really hard to do,
Yeah.
to the point where I just stopped. I'm like, this is too difficult. But one of the things I really like about it, take the cat video, for example, is it's fairly easy to do it now. Like making a 1 minute video before required a lot of time, effort, special effects capabilities, blah, 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 right? It was a whole setup, it was a whole process. But now with text to video, it's still kind of, you know, there's still a learning curve to it, but it's way easier than it was. And as a result of that, one thing that I'm really excited about is people using AI to become creative in ways that they couldn't before.
Mhm.
So for example, like maybe you have an idea for like that, like the cat video flipping burgers. It's like, oh, that'd be a really fun video, but I'm not going to invest a couple $1,000s into producing that video just to throw it online. But I will take an hour of my time in a text to video and put that online just as something fun to
Mhm.
do. And so because of that, I'm like, my hope is, my fingers crossed for this one, is that creative people will be much more creative using AI to just enhance what they're
Mhm.
doing. And I think that applies to businesses too, honestly. Like
Yeah.
whether, you know, any side of that creation, if we have an idea of what we want to do, AI can really help us get there much more quickly and cheaply than it was before.
Absolutely. And I think too, like something you talked about with like AI generated images,
Mhm.
text, video, all of that stuff. Where does that information all come from? Like it has to source from somewhere. Like,
Yeah.
are we stepping on toes of artists, photographers, content
Yes.
creators? Like, what's the ethics here?
You know, it's interesting that it's very timely because this morning I was on LinkedIn and I saw that OpenAI has released their PhD level models for
Okay.
$20,000 a month. $20,000 a month. That is absurd. I'm sorry. That is absurd. At first I thought their was it the professional version? There's the free, the pro, I forget what they call it, professional for $200 a month. So it's gone from 0 to 20, $200 a month, now to $20,000 a month. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute, wait. That is just absurdly expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is like, okay, the reason that they're able to do what they do as a company is because content creators for the last decade or more have put all their content online so that these companies can scrape the internet, use that information to train the system that's going to replace the people that they, got the information from in the first place.
Wow.
So, hmm, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And now they're charging
Yeah.
$20,000 a month for it. And I'm like, I don't know about that. Like, and so for me, where what I'm really hoping for is that the open source. That's what like DeepSeek and stuff, where when that came out and caused quite a stir. Um, I don't trust the security of that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be hesitant about the security of any of it. Like, so when it comes to the privacy and security, basically, it's how much do you trust the company, right? So it's like,
Right.
do I trust Google not to be scraping all my Google Docs and using it for ads? Things like that. So
Oh,
I don't
good point.
know. Yeah, I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know. The only way I would know
Yeah.
is if I saw it in an ad and caught them in
Right.
red-handed, so to speak. Other than that, I have no idea. They say they don't, but if they did, I don't think I would know. So it's a similar kind of thing with these bigger systems. But yeah, I don't know. Like, with DeepSeek and the open source, that's the thing that got me about DeepSeek was the open source aspect. And then people
Mm.
were installing it on their home computer and running it entirely locally. This incredibly smart thinking AI model, just running on a little stack of the Mac drives or whatever. They would just stack them
Yeah.
up these GPUs and run it there. And I'm like, okay, now that's really cool because now it's totally 100% under your control.
Yeah.
You can use it the way you want. And you're not, it's going to empower you as a creator rather than costing you $20,000 a month to do something
Right.
with, or $200
Right.
a month or whatever, which is like, okay, well, now we're getting into the stratification of society based on income and stuff like that. And I don't know. That one rubbed me the wrong way this morning. It really did. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
200 to
Yeah.
20,000, really? Yeah.
That's a lot.
That's a
I
lot.
mean,
That's a
yeah.
lot.
Who's
Yeah.
who's who's at the top? Like, who owns ChatGPT? Is this like ChatGPT the company, or is it?
Yeah, this is OpenAI is the one that owns it, and this is Sam Altman, is
Oh,
the
okay.
CEO of that. Yeah, and that led to the whole tiff between him and Elon Musk, where Elon's comment was, "Well, don't call yourself Open AI if you're going to do this kind of stuff." It's a fair criticism, honestly. I'm like, yeah, if the mission is to be open with the
Mm-hmm.
AI, charging that much for it,
Mm-hmm.
it by definition is not. And so I'm like, well,
Right. Right.
yeah, I don't know about that.
There's an
Mhm.
exclusivity to it for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially since how it's being built is it's being built on the content that people have produced already. That doesn't sound ethical or equitable, either one of those,
yeah.
to me. And so I don't know. I'm curious how that will play out. Probably in in courts and things like that. I don't know where that will be, but
Yeah. I mean, what do you say? Like it was released in 2023. So we've got at least, I mean, remember when like the .com thing happened? I mean, we were probably
right.
in high school when all that happened.
Mhm.
But like, like everything that happened, the next level, it's sort of like we get to a point where it starts raising questions and we have to go, oh, maybe we need to put restrictions around this, or maybe we need
Right.
to pull this back a little bit or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, is this is and if you don't know the answer to this question, that's okay, but as you were talking, I was thinking about it. So like AI is learning from scraping the internet, so
Mhm.
like there's misinformation possibly out
Mhm.
there as well, or um you know one time I asked for a source for something and it took me
Oh,
to this really like random website. And I was like,
oh,
oh yeah, I'm not going to pull that as fact.
yeah.
But do do you see this as like a rise in misinformation along with great information and helpful information,
Hmm.
but it's combing through?
Hmm.
How does someone fact check,
That's a
you
very good
know?
question. Yeah, it's so it's funny you say that too, because like I was as an English teacher, so we talked to students about this, and they would, student version of research is Googling stuff. That's basically what it means. And so they would look at websites and whatnot. And so when we talk about AI, so it scraped all that right into its training data, and so they're like, I don't know. For me, I kind of found it fascinating that people were talking about misinformation and bias because and like how do we do this, like, so you're saying you've never seen misinformation or bias on the internet before? Like it
Mhm.
scraped in all the Reddit comments, YouTube, I mean everything's in there. Like it's some of
Yeah.
the most biased information imaginable. Like the whole
Mhm.
internet is kind of just that way.
Right.
It's just free forum of just whatever people want to put on there, and it's just kind of the way it is. So yeah, it's all inside the LLM. And they were pointing out, I was listening to some podcasts from the research side. So I'm not like, I don't know how to code or create an AI. Like I'm nowhere
Right.
near into that computer side of it. I focus on the usability of the technology more than like kind of how it works.
Mhm.
But so I listened to the podcast to kind of get an idea of like, how does this system work in the background? And when they say it scrapes all the internet, it's like, oh, okay, so it's going to scrape literally everything from there. In which case, yeah, I'm not surprised it's biased. I'm not surprised at all. It
Right.
produces like a website for you because it doesn't know. It doesn't know how
Mhm.
to evaluate it. And as the companies tried to build this in, they were saying like from a company standpoint, it would be virtually impossible to go through their training data and just take out the stuff that they don't like or whatever. It's just too much.
Yeah.
Um, and would be way too much time. So um, I think it eventually falls back on the end user. Just like honestly, just like it did when you Googled stuff. It's like, like I would tell my students, it's like, okay, well, what is this website that you're looking at? Who's the author? Look up the author. What else do they publish? What is their background? You can probably look them up on LinkedIn or something like that. Um, are there other sites that kind of vet this? Or is that site citing their sources too? Like, where are they getting this information from? Do they,
Mm.
how is it phrased? How is it worded? Is it professional? There's all these sort of factors that kind of go into that. I think the exact same thing needs to be applied to the AI. One thing that does help though is using different AIs to fact check each other. So a lot of times I'll take what
Mm.
comes out of like a ChatGPT. If I'm writing an article, I'll
Mhm.
give that whole article to Perplexity and say, I want you to fact check this for me. Find citations that support and also ones that don't, that offer different opinions or whatever. And with that specific task, it tends to do a lot better with finding the information. And I'll start it with just like my own ideas or whatever, and then say, okay, let's use like a deep research or something to fact check all this and go through. And that's actually that's actually helpful. I like
Mhm.
that because it will point out alternative viewpoints and things like that. It's like, oh, okay, or it'll say maybe you should include such and such, and sometimes it's way off. So again, it comes back to me. It's like, nah, I disagree with that. I'm going to ignore that comment and move
Yeah.
on. But in that sense, it's just kind of a tool in that regard. How do you like when you're using with your clients with like social media and things like that? Do you fact check things? How do you kind of comb through that, or how do you advise your clients to do that?
Yeah, very similar to what you just said. I was hoping that, well, except for the running it through a different AI model,
Mm,
which I'll have to give that a try, but definitely doing some scoping on myself,
mm,
just to make sure, finding other articles that, and it's a manual work for me at this point, but I like that implementing like kind of like a secondary AI tool that can actually you kind of
yeah.
cross-examine the information. That would definitely be faster. But yeah, like I'm I'm curious, like I'm skeptical when especially when I get information that's like maybe like, hey, pull this quote or like, can you analyze this information? I have to be really, I kind of go in with the lens of a little bit of like, this information might not be real. And then from there,
Mm-hmm.
like, I feel like I can do a little bit of like investigative. And a lot of times it is like correct. Like the
Uh-huh.
articles they
Yeah.
post, it's like, or they cite, I'm like, oh yeah, that is good. Sometimes they cite things like, obviously social media is changing all the time. Web development is always
Mm-hmm.
changing. um, and so um, some of the articles that I'll click on will be from like 2022, 2023.
Mhm.
And I'm like, that's too old. I mean, like
Right.
things have changed so much the last
It's
couple of
amazing
years.
that's
Like
too
I
old,
need
huh?
something
Yeah.
more current. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I've gotten to the point where I'm like, well, if it doesn't say 2024 in the article, I'm not sharing it because like
Yeah.
like the information just changes so fast. It just yeah,
Yeah.
it's just so different. And so, but it is important that, the old saying, you can't believe everything you see on the internet.
Hmm.
Like I think we definitely need to enter into anything that we do with just kind of like that, hey,
Yeah.
we got to cross check here. Let's just make sure, let's just not
Hmm.
um take their word for it. And I think generationally, millennials, Gen Z, we've grown up, even some of the Gen X, like we've grown up with technology.
Hmm.
And so those are things that we lived through, that don't trust everything on the internet, and like, oh, there's
Hmm.
a fake picture, and
Yeah.
Photoshop, like we can do a million things in Photoshop. So it's just,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Photoshop is
yeah.
like magic to me, what people can do with that.
I love it. We have a realtor as a client. I love it when they send me the pictures and like, hey, can you get the trash can off the driveway? Or,
Mhm.
hey, can you, take out the garbage in the back of like one of
Mhm.
them had like a dumpster, and I was like, oh, yeah, like I love doing stuff like that. So
Oh,
those kind of challenges are good. But I mean, we're erasing things that are in reality really there.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
but they look ugly in the pictures, so we need to
Mhm.
take that out. They can see it when they get there. But yeah, so just little things like that. One of the things you we talked about, I think it was last week or earlier this week, that
Mhm.
has just been like, it is just kind of like took my thoughts of AI and really anything mechanical. But we're talking about how, in the wave of, the industrial revolution, when we
Mhm.
were like inventing tools to help us make our jobs easier. So
Mhm.
like, the cotton gin, the
Right.
tractor,
Mhm.
any sort of like farm equipment, that's, the car, the airplane,
Mhm.
like all this stuff that we've invented that have really made our lives easier. To the point where like now we have like gyms and, you
Mhm.
know, running plans and apps that will help us know when we're sitting for too long. Like
Mhm.
that was not a thing, 150 years ago.
Yeah.
People were having to do a lot of manual labor, and we've really created a society where, like, I mean, there are days I literally walk from my bed to my computer in my home office to the
Mhm.
couch to the kitchen, and maybe I make it out to the trash can or the mailbox, but
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
we're not using our bodies as much, and we've had to
Mhm.
over, compensate for that. But one of the things we talked about on our last phone call, this is the part that really like blew my mind, is that we have all these AI tools. Are we going to have to start having gyms for our brain? What are
Oh,
ways that
yeah.
we're going to,
Mhm.
um, stop using parts of our brain as we've stopped
Mhm.
being more active? We've seen like a rise in like diabetes or obesity, things like that.
Yep.
What are things? And so that I mean, we don't know the answer to that, but it's a little bit of a like a whoo,
Yeah.
wow. And since we
Yeah.
talked about that, I've just been like sort of like sitting around going, imagining what it could look like. What would a brain gym
Mhm.
would look like?
A brain gym. I like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
what
a
would
great
we be
point.
doing? Yeah, be
Well,
like, hey,
it's interesting too because I love this too because I totally agree. As a matter of fact, when you were talking about like the physical aspect of it, now we have gyms and things like that. I think it was the second Back to the Future. It's when they were the Old West, and the professor Doc or whatever he's talking to the people in this bar about how in the future people run for recreation, not just to run away from things, but to actually
yeah,
run for recreation. And everyone just laughed in the bar. They were like, "That's absurd. Why would you do that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I get that. From that time period, that would seem ridiculous because it's like, why would you need to go to a gym? We're working constantly. If anything, we wanted like a hot bath or something, to
right.
relax. Like, but then as the Industrial Revolution hit, everything shifted. Like, yeah, our physical capabilities, we had to keep those up. And a question that I get asked a lot is, will AI hurt my creativity? My response is, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. If it's overused, if you use it to be creative, yes, it will replace your creativity. Because just like you're saying, the mind is a mental muscle. Just use it or lose it. um I like, it's like learning languages or something, right? They'll fade if you don't keep using it.
Mhm.
My ability to spell has definitely been hurt by spell check, and especially autocorrect. And I know that, and I just rely on it anyway, because
Yes,
I never
yes.
could spell very well, even when I was younger. Um, but things like that. And so, um, over reliance on a maps app will hurt your sense of direction,
Mhm.
your just innate sense of direction. So over reliance on AI for writing, creativity, things like that. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, in terms of like what to do, and I don't know the answer to it, but just kind of throwing
Mhm.
this out there. One of the things I really hope it does, AI, and then in this cautionary tale, if you will, um, one of the things I really hope it does is get us outside, away from the screen, back into nature, whatever that means. Like it could be just
Mhm.
walking around the city. It could be nature too. At least you're not in front of the computer, right?
Right.
You're out there. It would, I hope, emphasize the importance of human connection, as opposed to, like, Zoom is, one thing,
Mhm.
but get out there and talk to people, and not through AI. Just talk to people about,
Mhm.
how they're doing, what they are, and also things that AI cannot do. Meditate as one of them. Has no sense of time, so it simply can't do that, and it doesn't dream. um, these are distinctly human characteristics, and honestly, to me, a source of our true creativity comes from that kind of silence, comes from the meditation state. Dreams, I've had dreams that I woke up and it completely changed what I was going to do that day, and it's like, I don't know where that comes from, but I do know that whatever it is in the subconscious that's processing that information and coming up with those ideas is very distinctly human and very unique. And I don't
Mhm.
see AI replacing that. I do see
Yeah.
AI, to our earlier point, enhancing the ideas that come from that space. And that's where I'm really hoping that we can use it as a tool, because then I see it as a win-win. Then
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, we're leveraging our human creativity and, I don't know if you want to say spiritual, or however one wants to get into that, right? That other side of the space, we're leveraging it from there to kind of re-anchor ourselves back in the world. And then once we do that, AI becomes a tool that enhances rather than takes away. But that's a very, again, to the
Mhm.
individual point, a very deliberate choice. Just like it's a
Mhm.
very deliberate choice to go to the gym, even though you
Yes.
may not want to go to the gym.
Yes.
Yeah, like, you
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
keep it going. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a really good point. I just hadn't, I mean, it's again like AI is so new.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we've seen kind of the, you know, any negative side effects. We're starting to see maybe some, but like
Mm-hmm.
what 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 impact would this have on humanity, you know?
Yeah,
So yeah, I think basically just to sum it all up, it's a tool.
it's a
It's a
tool,
very
right?
powerful, awesome tool, and when
Yeah,
used correctly,
and
can
it's
produce
important
wonderful
to put the
things.
tool down sometimes and be like,
Yes.
you know what, I'm going to try this a different way, just to flex the
Hmm.
muscles, so to speak. Just deliberately try it a different way. And if what you produce, to our point, is not up to par or whatever, give it to the AI. Have the AI take it from there. It's a really good way of leveraging it, in a way that I think uses its strengths while also supporting our strengths, our human strengths.
Hmm. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you. We're kind of wrapping up our time here, and
Yeah.
I really, really appreciate you coming on here to talk about AI and just the future, the current, the present of AI. This has been really, really insightful and helpful, and I hope to have many more conversations with you. I just think this is just fascinating to listen to, and to hear perspectives on that, especially marketing, how it pertains to marketing.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Samuel, and yeah,
Thank you, Kelly. Yeah,
for
this was
next time.
fabulous. And I can already think of more things that we could talk. When you mentioned marketing, I'm like, oh, maybe that's the next one to go down. I'm
Yes.
curious. AI has affected marketing. I'm really curious about that with the
Yeah.
authenticity. So we'll put a pin in that one and come back. But yeah, this has been, a great discussion. I'm looking forward to more. This is
Yeah.
fabulous and very important, I think, for the general conversation. Like you said, we don't really know where we're going with this technology
Right.
yet. So having these talks is very
Exactly.
important.
Exactly.